This is Gnostic Media Research and Publishing's podcast episode number 149. I'm your host, Jan Irvin. This episode is an interview with Curtis Duncan titled The Conspiracy to Feminize Males and Masculinize Females, and is being released on Thursday, August 16, 2012. My interview with Curtis was recorded on August 11, 2012. This is our first online video interview, so if you're getting this interview in audio only, please go to the Gnostic Media website if you'd like to see the video version. And I heard Curtis on Red Ice Radio's 314 show a couple of weeks ago with Lana, and reached out to him, and we wanted to have him on Gnostic Media as well to follow up on our interview with Karen of GirlWritesWhat. And Doctor, which is a pseudonym, Curtis Duncan is one of the world's most knowledgeable holistic health and weight loss experts and researchers, and a master emotional freedom technique practitioner. Curtis has spent over 10 years independently researching holistic health and is one of the world's most knowledgeable health experts. His areas of expertise include the law of attraction, the amazing power of self-love, mind-body medicine, vitamin D and the miracles of sunlight exposure, agriculture, nutrition, the dangers of environmental chemicals and GMOs, herbal medicine, natural remedies, holistic weight loss, essential oils, stress management, women's and men's health, preventing and curing disease, the dangers of Western medicine, mind control and propaganda, sexuality, sexual and reproductive health, eugenics, and food and health conspiracies. He has a deep understanding of the politics and business of obesity and disease, the dangers of pharmaceutical drugs and conventional medical treatments, and the fraudulent global medical monopoly and their conspiracy to make humanity sick so they can make endless profits at individuals' and society's expense. His philosophy is your health is your birthright and responsibility. His mission is to empower people to be healthy as ever and to have the kind of body that they desire. He is truly passionate and committed to helping people improve their quality of life. He knows that, armed with the right information and tools, people can make better choices for their health and longevity. He has the necessary information and tools so that people can live life more abundantly. He has worked with clients throughout the globe, and people have gotten phenomenal results applying the tools or information that he has. He is the creator of several health-oriented products, which include A Women's Guide to Herbs and The Chemical Feminization and Emasculation of Men. His mission is to empower people to be healthy by giving them excellent information. The Chemical Feminization and Emasculation of Men is an awesome information-packed recording on how to avoid hidden chemicals that are behind the reason why testosterone levels have been declining, 30 million men have impotence, sperm counts have dropped by 50%, and men's penises are getting smaller. The chemicals are also behind the exploding rates of male genital birth defects, autism, ADHD, prostate, testicular, and male breast cancer, belly fat, obesity, low libido, and man boobs, or gynecomastia. These chemicals also have gender-bending effects and cause men to act and behave like women and be gay. This is must-have information for all men and women, and that can be found at www.drcurtis.com. And another talk that he's done is Harm by Hormones, how estrogenic chemicals make women fat, sick, and manly, and is an excellent information-packed recording on how to avoid the estrogen-mimicking chemicals that are behind the exploding rates of fibroids, PCOS, endometriosis, female infertility and miscarriages, and breast, ovarian, uterine, and cervical cancer. 1 in 8 women today will develop breast cancer as a result of these chemicals. These chemicals are also the reason why girls are going into puberty in the 2nd grade and why millions of women are fat and have flabby bellies. These chemicals also have gender-bending effects and cause women to act and behave like men and be gay or lesbian. And again, this talk can also be found on www.drcurtisduncan.com. And upcoming shows. It looks like Professor Earl Lee will be up next, and then Peter Gorman regarding his book on ayahuasca, or maybe he will be next. And my apologies for continuing to get other shows caught up before that. And there's a couple of others lined up. Possibly Robert Forty will be back. and donations. This episode is dedicated to Terry, Luis, Carlos, Aaron, Javier, Daniel, Cheyenne, and Tony. Thank you so much to all of you. And this show wouldn't be here without you. And also, the Secret History of Magic Mushrooms widget on the Gnostic Media website runs out at the end of this month on August 31st. So please, please, please get those donations in as soon as possible so that we can get this project going. We're still way underfunded on the project. And we do our best to provide just about everything here for free. So please help out with the podcast donations and or the Secret History of Magic Mushrooms video and book project. We greatly appreciate your support. This show is run on donations and our website sales. This is not corporate media, but independent media in the truest sense of the words. And by donating or ordering one of the books, a DVD, the She Who Remembers archives, a t-shirt, or getting a membership to the website to download the older podcasts, you help to continue this unprogramming. And the views expressed by the authors and guests of this unprogram are their own and are not necessarily those held by myself, the host, or Gnostic Media. You can go to the website at www.gnosticmedia.com. That's GNOSTIC media.com. You can contact me directly through the contact form on the website or at contact@gnosticmedia.com. Please also check out Tragedy and Hope and the Peace Revolution podcast, the School Sucks podcast, James Corbett's Corbett Report, and James Evan Pilato's Media and Monarchy. Thanks for listening, and thank you for your support. And here is my interview with Curtis, the conspiracy to feminize males and masculinize females. Enjoy. Curtis Duncan, welcome to the Gnostic Media Podcast. How are you doing today?
I am doing well, Jan. Thank you again so much for having me on the air. And I do appreciate you taking out the time to bring me on your great show. And I'm doing very well. Thank you for asking.
Well, you know, I heard you on Red Ice Radio, or I guess it's called 314, which is Henrik's wife or girlfriend's show, Lana. And so I checked that out. Somebody had sent your interview with her to me right after I had Karen of GirlWritesWhat on. And they were just connecting the dots. And, you know, I had heard and known about a lot of this information, but I hadn't heard anybody put it together in a nice little package as you have done in your presentation. And I've listened to your interview with her a couple of times and searched out some of your information on the internet. So why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and your educational background, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, my name is Dr. Curtis Duncan. I got my undergrad degree from Hampton University. It was a small school located in Hampton, Virginia. And then I got my master's degree from Clark Atlanta University in marketing. So a lot of my business, a lot of my degrees that I got from college were in marketing. However, I've always had a passion about just health in general. And I kind of got into health when I was 18. You know, I just wanted to just find out basic ways to improve my diet and also how to improve just my quality of life. I come from a family or a background where everyone has diabetes, everyone has heart disease. So I was interested in not being a victim. And I did not want to have those particular conditions. So I just began to just do research, kind of research, what to eat and, just some different basic kind of nutritional type things.
And what's your doctor's degree in?
I'd actually, I go by the name doctor. I actually do not have a doctorate degree, nor am I a certified licensed medical professional. I'm not an MD. I use the term doctor because it's a nickname that people gave to me when I was like 23, and I would just do all these lectures. They would say, "Hey, doctor," because it was kind of a doctor originally means teacher. So that's why my nickname, if you will, is Dr. Curtis Duncan, because I am a teacher, and something that people just, called me for so long that I decided to embrace the title, particularly the spirit of the title.
So you do not have a Wundtian doctor's degree?
No, I am not an MD. I am not a medical doctor. And it's funny because when I was younger, I did want to be a medical doctor. But I realized that I didn't want to get into a whole bunch of debt. So at the age of like 10, I kind of decided against being a doctor because, you had to go through all like 8 years of training and get all these student loans. And that just completely turned me off to the field. But I guess, I've always had a passion for people and a passion to empower people and to help people. And I think that has remained with me ever since the time I was very young. So, I'm kind of living that out right now, and just doing the work that I do and, researching and then, spreading the information out there.
What is the function of the endocrine system, and what are endocrine disruptors?
Yeah, the endocrine system, the function of the endocrine system is the endocrine system is essentially just a series of glands within your body. And these glands all secrete different hormones. So, for example, you have the pineal glands, you have the pituitary glands, you have the thyroid gland, you have the pancreas, which is a gland, you have the testes, which are a gland, you have the ovaries, which in women are a gland. And all these different glands secrete hormones. And these hormones actually act as signals to the cells within your body. So it essentially tells them what to do. So, for example, when you consume carbohydrates, your gland in your body, the pancreas, secretes insulin. And the purpose of the hormone insulin is to tell your cells to uptake the glucose that is about to go into your bloodstream. Because otherwise, if you have high glucose levels, it will kill you. High glucose levels are the hallmark of type 2 diabetes. But what happens with type 2 diabetes, the cells become resistant to the effects of insulin for a variety of reasons. And what happens is that the blood sugar levels become elevated, and that's how heart disease and a host of other health problems begins to come about. And this is at epidemic proportions here in America. But essentially, that's what the endocrine system is. It's just a series of glands within your body that secrete different hormones that essentially tell your body what to do. So, for example, when people feel hungry, that is a matter of hormones. The hormone ghrelin, I believe, actually stimulates your body to, feel the sensation of hunger. When you feel, horny, have libido, that is one of the functions of testosterone, having healthy testosterone levels. So, it stimulates also sperm production. When, you feel tired, that is going to be the result of melatonin, which is a hormone that you secrete when it's time for you to rest. So all these different endocrine glands play a very important role in just the proper functioning of our bodies. And endocrine disruptors, essentially, they are a class of chemicals that either block the proper functioning of the hormones that get secreted by these glands. Number two, they actually act as hormones. So a lot of the chemicals, the endocrine disrupting chemicals, actually function as estrogens. Or number three, they actually prevent or block the action of the certain hormones. So a lot of the chemicals also, they block the action of testosterone. So essentially, without...
Let me ask you, what about things like wheat and how wheat and grains with their LDL cholesterol block insulin production, and wouldn't those also play into, like you hear reports of, for instance, beer containing estrogen?
Mm-hmm.
So would, I'm just trying to look at this possible connection between the grains and the insulin levels and estrogen and these things. Is there a definite connection there outside of the chemicals themselves?
Yes. And the reason being is a couple of factors. Number one, most of your grains are going to be heavily sprayed with pesticides. And most of your pesticides that are used in this country are endocrine disrupting chemicals. They actually are functional estrogens. Number two, the grains themselves, even without the pesticides, even if you're eating organic whole grains, any type of grain is going to increase your insulin levels, because anytime you eat
because of the LDL cholesterol and everything and the carbos.
Yes, exactly. So essentially, you consume 2 slices of whole wheat bread. Okay, so then that whole wheat bread gets broken down into glucose. glucose, then, your body has to then secrete insulin as a result of the glucose being in your bloodstream. So what the effects of insulin are is that, number one, it actually decreases in men the production of testosterone and increases the production of estrogen within men. It also does the same thing within women. It actually increases their estrogen levels. That's why a high carbohydrate diet is actually linked to increase a risk factor of breast cancer. What it also does in women, too high insulin levels also stimulate the production of testosterone in women's ovaries, and this begins to set about a disease known as polycystic ovarian syndrome. It's usually a disease that comes about when a woman is resistant to insulin, when she has insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes. But type 2 diabetes is just one class of insulin resistance, because many people in this country, it's estimated about almost 75% of people are insulin resistant at some level. They just haven't reached the point of insulin resistance where a doctor or so-called medical professional would say that, oh, you have a disease known as quote unquote type 2 diabetes. But the grains themselves, yes, they do, it's just a natural thing that they require the release of insulin, and insulin itself does increase estrogen levels within men and women, and it decreases testosterone levels in men. And this is something that has been shown through scientific research. Whenever you consume like a high glucose solution, testosterone levels go down by at least 25%. So that is one of the main functions of consuming any type of grain. It's going to just dramatically increase your insulin levels.
What type of chemicals are we talking about here? Let's go into some of the actual names of the chemicals.
One of the most common chemicals that a lot of people know about here in this country is bisphenol A, or BPA. This is it has been around since like the early 1800s, or the late 1800s rather, and it was primarily originally designed to give to women as kind of like a hormone replacement, because bisphenol A is actually a functional estrogen. So they're actually going to give this bisphenol A. Imagine, we know a lot of research about bisphenol A now, but they're actually going to give this to women as a hormone replacement. But bisphenol A is an endocrine disrupting chemical. It is a functional estrogen, but it's also anti-androgen, meaning that it has anti-testosterone actions. And bisphenol A is, it's found in, a variety of products, primarily canned foods being one of the primary sources. So that's one of the main chemicals that people are being exposed to. And according to the CDC, that is found in 93% of Americans' bodies. Another chemical that is widely discussed these days is a pesticide or herbicide by the name of atrazine. Atrazine is a very powerful endocrine disrupting chemical made by a company by the name of Syngenta. Syngenta was a spinoff of two pharmaceutical companies, and I believe GlaxoSmithKline and another company by the name of AstraZeneca. So these two pharmaceutical companies just created a spinoff company, and they make this product by the name of atrazine. And atrazine, it's a very powerful endocrine disruptor. It's actually found, according to the USDA, in 94% of Americans' drinking water. And it's used primarily in the production of corn. Because here in America, corn is everything. It's corn and soy. That's all we grow. Corn, soy, and wheat, essentially. That's all we grow in America, just all those four commodity crops. So atrazine is used heavily on corn. And this is actually documented in the great documentary film King Corn, which kind of
right. I've seen that.
Yeah,
sure.
Talks about and they actually one of the scenes they say, oh yeah, we're going to use this chemical by the name of atrazine, and we're going to spray it on our corn crop. And atrazine, it is a huge groundwater contaminant. That's why it is banned actually in Europe, but here in America, EPA allows it just due to the corporations control the EPA.
And the mass production of using corn syrup, you go across the border into Mexico and South America, and you don't see corn syrup in all the products like you do here, and I spent quite a bit of time down in Peru, for instance, and I don't drink, so I think I may have had one or two down there the whole trip, but you look at it and it's like how Coca-Cola was made in the 70s and 80s here. and it tastes much better. It's actually real cane sugar and not this GMO stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Corn dominates everything, and it's in all the processed foods. It's in all the sports drinks, energy. A lot of the sports drinks and sodas and other beverages that they give to kids, and a lot of it's contaminated with mercury. But it's also contaminated with atrazine, which again is another very powerful endocrine disrupting chemical.
I was just going to ask you in your interview with Lana, you talked about atrazine causing male fish to turn into females and male frogs to assume a female position. Would you go into that?
Yeah, what atrazine does, number one, in regards to male fish, the male fish, when they are exposed to atrazine, and just at very, low doses, they actually become hermaphrodites. They begin to actually start producing. They actually start producing cells, like regular ovum cells within their testes, and they actually become a functional hermaphrodite. They're actually a so-called male fish that has female sex organs. And as far as atrazine and its effect upon frogs, and they're assuming the feminine mating position, what happens is that atrazine actually feminizes the brain. And how it does that is that atrazine is a functional estrogen, but it's also a very powerful anti-androgen chemical. So it actually blocks the effects of testosterone, because all human beings, and most animals too, if the testosterone is not available, they are going to have the brain of a female, because we all essentially, have the brains of a female until testosterone kicks in, at a very early age when a human being or animal is developing, and the testosterone actually gets converted into estrogen, and then the estrogen actually masculinizes the brain. So the frog actually has the gender identity of a male and has masculine characteristics. But what atrazine does, and many of these other chemicals do, they actually block testosterone, actually within the womb. So there is no testosterone available. So then the man, is a man per se. He looks like a male, but he has the brain of a female, and thus the gender identity of a female. So that's why the frogs in this case, when put in the presence of male frogs, they actually, they actually assume the feminine mating position.
How do these chemicals cause female traits?
What they do is that number one, in animals, what they do is that since they are a functional estrogen, the animals are very sensitive to these chemicals. So they actually start producing, female sex organs, and also female ovums or female eggs. Now in humans, it's a little bit different. So, for example, for an adult male, what these chemicals do is that they actually will stimulate men to develop breasts. So, a lot of men these days, they develop breast cancer, and they also have man boobs, if you will. And that's because the chemicals actually are estrogens, and estrogen.
Now, wouldn't that also be in large part compounded with the wheat and grains as well?
Well, absolutely, because if you're consuming a large amount of carbohydrates of any type, which is pretty much dominates the American diet, that is going to decrease testosterone levels, which is also then going to increase estrogen levels, and it's going to increase belly fat. And belly fat, what that does is that it actually converts testosterone into estrogen. So that's why a lot of men who actually have, protruding bellies or beer bellies.
Wheat belly, as Dr. Davis calls it.
Yeah, wheat bellies, exactly. What happens is that their testosterone is then converted via the process of aromatization into estrogen. So that's why a lot of, men who are obese, they have the big bellies and they have the breasts too. And that's what these hormones do. They actually stimulate men to develop breasts. But not only that, they actually block the effects of testosterone within the body. They suppress testosterone. And what that does is that when a man's testosterone levels are suppressed, he then becomes obese, because testosterone it actually prevents, it's about having muscles. So it's not about storing fat. estrogen is actually the hormone which is responsible for storing fat. And that's why women tend to store more fat. And nature provided it that way because women are the ones who are
reproduce.
They reproduce and they actually have to support life. So they need fat within their breasts and within their hips in order to be able to produce a healthy child. But men, we didn't need that. So the testosterone gets suppressed. So then the men gain weight around their stomach, which tends to happen, when men also take some of those other pharmaceutical drugs, which also suppress testosterone, like some of the statin drugs. They begin to
Right, exactly. And, I know that you're a fan of Sally Fallon, and I've had her on my show a couple of times going into the whole statin drug fraud. And I've also talked with Dr. Glidden and a couple of others about the low-fat diet and the damage that does as well, just in and of itself. Mm-hmm. And then you have the statin drugs lowering fat. But what Sally Fallon points out in her documentary, The Oiling of America, is that on top of all of these things that you're saying, the chemicals and then the wheat and the grains, a low-fat diet also dramatically impacts the reproductive system and prevents people from reproducing as well. And then the low-fat diet, of course, the brain being 77% cholesterol, then you can't think. The brain is cholesterol, but and animal cholesterol, not LDL, to be clear. And then you can't think, and you're not getting the saturated fats that your brain needs to run on to think clearly. So they're hitting us on several different levels here simultaneously.
Absolutely, it is very much, at least for men, it's very much a holistic thing. It is not.
It's a holistic approach to eugenics.
Yeah. There's a holistic approach to essentially emasculating men.
Right.
As far as, essentially sterilizing them.
Right.
Sterilizing them and, reducing their testosterone levels. So then, good old problem reaction solution. So then they can start selling, testosterone therapy, which, actually a lot of pharmaceutical companies now these days are actually offering that because they have a so-called condition that they've created, out of thin air, known as andropause. You have menopause, where a woman actually stops producing estrogen. But now you have andropause, where they say, oh, when you're at the age of 40, men stop producing testosterone, which is a total lie, because men
should be, what I remember is that men can produce sperm and have kids into their 90s as long as they're healthy.
Absolutely. So, and sperm production is totally dependent upon testosterone. So the idea that you're supposed to, be impotent at 40, and have your testosterone levels are suppressed is a total myth. It's based upon, poor diet, and it's based upon just, the chronic levels of exposure to all these different chemicals, which have multi-generational effects in the sense that, if for example, if a mother is exposed to the chemical, if a male fetus is exposed to the chemical in the womb, from her mother consuming all different products, and also just being in this environment, because whatever you put in the environment is going to end up everywhere, particularly as it pertains to these chemicals. They're in the air, they're in the water, they're in the food. There is essentially no way that people can totally avoid the chemicals. Totally. I mean, you just can't. Because it's within the environment.
Any group that thinks that they are safe and protected from these things is fooling themselves.
Absolutely. And there's no way you can totally avoid these chemicals. And that's why they're used, because there's no way that you can avoid them. You can, stop.
Yeah, but at the same time, the people using them, they can't avoid them either, so they're poisoning themselves. They can try and restrict the intake as much as possible, but if it's in the air, it's in the water, it's in the oceans, then it's in all the food supply, it's in everything. They couldn't possibly, unless they're, growing food inside a bubble, they couldn't possibly escape this stuff.
You're absolutely right. But the people who, manufacture these chemicals, they're psychopaths.
Well, yeah, and their critical thinking skills are, being able to fool and lie and trick others is their whole thing, but yet they can't see. It's like the logic of using radiation to kill cancer.
Mm-hmm.
before the cancer kills the host, right?
Exactly.
And and like chemotherapy kills like 80 or 90% of the patients, and so I guess they think that they're gonna kill everything and hopefully save themselves just at the last second before they wipe themselves out. I mean, the level of stupidity here is just incredible.
Absolutely, absolutely. But many of these people, they're also transhumanists. So, they don't want to be human anymore. They want to, have all these cyberborg technologies and implant themselves with all types of
Well,
weird.
I mean, good luck with that. You gotta live in reality, and until all of that stuff is, I don't think we're at Lawnmower Man stage yet.
No, we're definitely not. We're not at the point where we can, artificially implant, all these different organs, and that's just, it's crazy. It's crazy. It makes no sense. But, hey, I mean, that's, again, the people who, manufacture the GMOs and the chemicals, they're senseless. They're senseless. So, um,
let's talk about Roundup.
mhm. Yeah, Roundup made by Monsanto. The history of Monsanto. They were, essentially a chemical warfare company. And actually, recently in the news, people who keep up with the news, the U.S. government now is actually, after about almost like 40 years, they're actually going to clean up Agent Orange, in Vietnam, start the cleanup of Agent Orange in Vietnam. And Monsanto and Dow Chemical were the companies that actually made Agent Orange. They were, again, the chemical warfare contractor that actually made that herbicide, which the U.S. government sprayed all throughout Vietnam, not to defoliate, Vietnam, but to destroy Vietnamese agriculture. It was a form of genocide that they utilized. And this was actually suggested by the Rand Institute, that they just spray herbicides throughout the whole country, destroy all the rice crops, so then they can destroy the Vietnamese people. So Monsanto, they were the company that actually, made this chemical warfare weapon. And now they've actually have gotten into the business of patenting seeds. And one of the things that they've done recently is that they've created genetically modified canola, cotton, soy, and corn plants that are resistant to the effects of their herbicide Roundup. So essentially, when you spray Roundup on these plants, you can spray a ton of it without it damaging the plant, because Roundup
Sure.
is a non-selective herbicide, meaning that it kills everything. So
Except
Roundup,
for the plants that have been genetically modified to handle it.
exactly, that have the gene to resist it. So Roundup, it is the world's most commonly used pesticide in the world, and Roundup is a very, very powerful endocrine disruptor. It's been shown to cause birth defects right now in Argentina, where they grow huge amount of cultures of soy. A lot of the children down there are being born deformed. And Roundup also is a very powerful anti-testosterone chemical, meaning that it actually destroys sperm cells, testicular cells in men, and actually suppresses testosterone. And it does this within the womb. So, it's definitely going to emasculate male fetuses, and also does this to human males. And genetically modified soy is, pretty much in everything, because they give it to the animals. They feed the animals with the genetically modified soy. It's actually, huge people that consume genetically modified soy under the guise of being health conscious. So it's in all the soy milks, because
Sure.
90% of the soy these days is genetically modified, and it's all sprayed with Roundup. And Roundup now is thought to be one of the primary reasons why genetically modified soy is so bad, and it's linked to miscarriages and to uterine problems due to the effects of Roundup, because Roundup itself is a chemical, but then within the Roundup formula are other chemicals that the company does not have to list, because those are considered to be trade secrets. So some of the surfactants that are in Roundup, and some of the other chemicals that are found within the formula, are actually considered to be even more deadlier than actual Roundup or glyphosate itself. So Roundup is a very powerful endocrine disruptor, and it's found in all of our drinking water supply now. It's found in the air, and it's found in us because we're consuming all this genetically modified soy.
So, what are the effects of these chemicals on testosterone, sperm health, and penis size?
The quick answer is that, all these chemicals sterilize men. They make men's penises smaller, and they all suppress testosterone. And now the important thing is that a lot of this occurs in the womb. So a lot of the effects of these chemicals actually occurs before the male fetus is even born. So, for example, what happens is that, the male's fertility is actually determined in the womb, actually not by his penis size, but by the size of the distance, rather, the distance between his anus and his genitals. It's known as the AGD index. And this index, is considered in animals to be a sign of masculinity and fertility. And what these chemicals do by blocking testosterone, they actually reduce the size between the anus to the genitals. Because in women, their distance is much shorter, than it is in men, because their vagina is a lot closer to the anuses than the penis is to the anus. So what happens is that these chemicals actually, functionally feminize a man's genitalia and reduce the size, the distance rather, between the anus and the genitals. And this causes the man to experience lifelong fertility problems. It's also linked to men having smaller penises and undescended testicles. Because what happens is as a result of testosterone, the clitoris becomes a penis, the vagina essentially closes, and the ovaries become testes. But when there's not enough testosterone around, these things don't happen. So essentially, what happens is that the man, even before he's born, becomes functionally sterilized. And not only that, what happens is that the chemicals, they have epigenetic effects. Epigenetic meaning above the gene. So this means is that, these chemicals don't necessarily change the genes of people, but what they do is that they affect how certain genes express themselves. And this is something that, a lot of scientists have found now is actually the real issue with genes themselves. It's not that genes cause cancer. It's that some of the epigenetic changes that come about as a result of some of these exposures to these chemicals change how the genes express themselves. So then, for example, a person, develops breast cancer as a result of their mother's exposure to bisphenol A, for example, or even the soy estrogen gynstein, or they go into puberty early as a result of being exposed to these chemicals in the womb. So what happens is that these chemicals actually, they actually cause multi-generational infertility. So when the male fetus, is exposed to the chemical 4 generations after him, meaning that his children, his grandchildren, and his great-grandchildren are all going to have fertility issues and aren't going to be able to produce sperm as a result of being exposed to these chemicals, and the chemicals having epigenetic effects, negative epigenetic effects upon the future generations. And how it affects testosterone levels, it actually, destroys the cells within in the testes which actually produce testosterone. And again, this happens also on a multi-generational level. This has been shown in a new research that has just came out in regards to bisphenol A. So essentially what happens is that the male fetus gets exposed to these chemicals and his testosterone levels are permanently lower than they should be. And this is one of the reasons why men today are producing less testosterone than their grandfathers and have much less sperm. Sperm counts have dropped by 50%, here in America. And 75% of the sperm that men produce today are defective. So that means only 25% of the sperm that men produce today is actually, has any value. So most of the sperm is just totally, it's junk sperm, if you will. And again, this is something that is lifelong. And the testosterone levels are going to be suppressed.
So there's no way to heal this or reverse this, you're saying?
Well, that's something that has yet to be answered. I do believe that it possibly can be reversed, just due to the fact that it has an epigenetic effect, and and through our thoughts, we can change the way our genes do express this.
Well, what about through proper diet, nutrition, getting a reverse osmosis water filter, not eating any grains anymore, staying the hell out of the middle of the grocery store and only buying your food around the outside, these types of things? I think you could greatly limit the intake of these types of toxins in your environment?
Absolutely. You can definitely limit them. And the things you mentioned will definitely, I feel as though, help to, mitigate a lot of the damage that is done. A lot of the damage as pertains to fertility is permanent because, when you essentially shorten the distance between the anus and the genitals, that's permanent.
Sure.
Hypospadia is permanent. Undescended testicles, I mean, that could be fixed with surgery, but some of the damage that's done as pertains to fertility, those things are permanent. But as far as, the suppression of testosterone, yes, by limiting your exposures to these chemicals, by having a healthy diet, by meditating, reducing stress levels, and some other different things that men can do that will help to, mitigate, not prevent, mitigate some of the damage that has been done. But most of these chemicals, they actually destroy, the testosterone producing cells that are found within the testes. So, and like I said, a lot of this damage occurs actually within the womb. So that's why, these chemicals are so dangerous because, they do things that in the womb that, can't be fixed. But, that's what happens as it pertains to testosterone. It suppresses testosterone. And this happens, for male fetuses, and this happens for adult males. So that's one of the results. That's one of the things that occurs as a result of being exposed to these chemicals.
Let's get into population control and eugenics. How does all of this tie together, in your opinion?
Well, it ties together, because population control essentially is about, there's two ways to do it. You have to, number one, increase the death rate. So all these chemicals, they're toxic. They one of the primary things that these chemicals do is that they cause type 2 diabetes. Because again, the endocrine system, the pancreas is one of the primary endocrine glands within the body. And most people have issues with their pancreas these days, in the sense that they're either insulin resistant, or they have type 2 diabetes, because that is the most common form of diabetes today in the world. And about almost 360 million people across the planet have type 2 diabetes or insulin resistant at some level.
Eat your whole grains.
Absolutely. The USDA has totally failed people in that way. And I believe that's by design too. But yes, so, a lot of people these days, they have insulin resistance. And that is the primary killer of people, the high blood sugar. Not high cholesterol, but high blood sugar. We've got it backwards. We've been told to worry about cholesterol. There's a lot of fear mongering about that. But it's high blood sugar that actually kills people. And most people these days, they have high blood sugar when they're 10 years old because they're eating all these, all the Cocoa Puffs and
sure. And you see the obesity in children everywhere today. And when I was a kid, you didn't see, when I was in my elementary school, there was maybe one or two overweight kids, and I can walk down the street in my town here and just see overweight kids everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, the chemicals, they cause heart disease and they cause type 2 diabetes, just by the simple fact that they cause insulin resistance, which again is the primary killer here in America today. It's not high cholesterol. And you can estimate about almost 600,000 people a year, excuse me, die as a result of heart disease. And one of the primary risk factors of heart disease is high blood sugar or type 2 diabetes. So, these chemicals, they increase the death rate. And number two, they lower the birth rate. And they lower the birth rate by destroying people's ability on a permanent basis, by, again, the whole epigenetic effects upon the germline, making people be essentially infertile and sick. They destroy people's ability to reproduce. And again, these effects occur, generations down the line. So essentially, when people are exposed to these chemicals, even if their great grandmother was exposed to them, they're going to have fertility defects. So essentially, if you increase the death rate and lower the birth rate, then you can achieve population control. And this is the way in which it can be done, and people won't necessarily perceive it, because a lot of people talk about population control and, some of the the Georgia Guidestones and Ted Turner,
sure,
some of their comments, but it's,
or Bill Gates.
Yeah, Bill Gates. But again, from my understanding, they're not going to use military to achieve population control. They're using that as well, but yeah. They are. But a
You know,
lot of
and
people,
and if you pay attention to who goes to war, it's typically the men. So the men are sacrificed, right?
absolutely.
Which just like all of the stuff that we're discussing here and the and we'll go into the feminism movement in a moment, but all of this stuff is attacking the men, and the men are considered disposable in the society. The men go to war, the men go off to work while the women are taken care of, which I went into extensively with in my interview with Karen of GirlWritesWhat, for those who want to hear more of that right now. But it's that anyway, I just lost my train of thought, but they're just hitting everything on so many levels here to try and they're controlling the men's appetite, sending the men to war, putting all of these chemicals so that men can't reproduce. And basically, if you're, and there's exceptions, but if you're not intelligent enough to research things and to eat healthy and organic and cut the carbos and processed foods out of your diet, then they've pretty much got you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because and one thing I want to mention as pertains to men is that most of the infertility that's occurring today in couples is the result of the male, not the female. It's the result of men having defective sperm, sperm that causes miscarriages, because it is the sperm that determines the gender. But if the sperm has also been rendered defective, then that baby, once it actually, fertilizes the egg, it is going to miscarry as a result of a defect of the sperm, not of the woman. So essentially, most of the fertility problems that people have today in this country, it's a result of men having fertility problems, not of, women are also getting sterilized too, but it's a result of the man having fertility problems and having low sperm and just not being able to produce high quality sperm, having a low sperm quality. So essentially, what's going on with men today and with the whole population control factor is that they're essentially just sterilizing people in order to lower the birth rate. So a lot of people these days, they're unable to conceive, and they have no idea why. They're getting all this in vitro fertilization, and no one's telling them that it's really, the issue is with your male partner. His sperm, he's eating too much soy, whatever. His sperm is defective. And when
Eating
the
too
woman
much soy, drinking too much beer, eating too many carbos,
there you go.
and compounding this whole thing.
There you go. So essentially, that totally fits in with the whole population control movement, because again, just like Henry Kissinger said in his report that came out, I believe, I can't think of the name of the report, the National Security Memorandum, Global something 2000. Of course, they mention about fomenting wars, but one of the other things that I definitely know that they're doing is that they're creating these chemicals in order to increase the death rate and to lower the birth rate. And that's kind of a way that they soft kill, or they are going to soft kill humanity, because
Sure.
because if you use nuclear weapons, if you have so many wars, then people will kind of perceive what's going on, like, why is there so much violence going on in the world? But hey, if you sterilize people through GMOs, you sterilize people through vaccines and through chemicals that people are exposed to every single day of their
Sure.
life.
Well, uh, I was in Serbia during the war against Yugoslavia, and of course, in the media here, they're always saying that they weren't using uranium weapons and all of this stuff, but they were raining down all kinds of chemical and radioactive shit all over the place,
Mm-hmm.
and it certainly had an impact. A lot of deformed birth started happening
Mm-hmm.
directly after the U.S. invasion, and all of this kind of stuff. So they are, in fact, even using the military to then go and pollute these populations with all of these chemicals as well.
Absolutely. DU was used, or depleted uranium was used in the Serbian War, and it was also used heavily in Iraq. And
Sure.
DU, it has a, DU, it has a half-life of 4.5 billion years. So that means that, whatever you use DU as a military weapon against the population is going to be there in that area for 4.5 billion years. And in all the babies now that you see, in Iraq, particularly in Fallujah, they're all born like with, just totally deformed, big heads that look like alien heads.
Yeah, I've
Um,
seen some of that.
yeah. And even if you look up some of the footage of Agent Orange, because Agent Orange, what that contained, it was, a bunch of chemicals. But again, it was made by Dow Chemical Monsanto. It also
You
contained
know,
dioxin.
sure.
And
And the sick thing is that, somebody up there is applauding and celebrating these deformations and all of this crap. That is what is frightening.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it's very frightening that someone is applauding this, but you're seeing it, and these chemical warfare weapons and these nuclear weapons definitely, they are to destroy humanity, and that's what they're used for. And of course, again, I'm talking about the disposable male. The men, for example, in Vietnam, they were told, oh, Agent Orange is fine, it's totally
Sure.
safe.
Yeah, my
No,
stepdad was sprayed with Agent Orange a number of times in Vietnam, and he's had significant problems from it.
mhm. And some of those problems again might have been passed along to you as a
Well, my
result.
stepdad, so.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, I thought you said your father. Okay, yeah, but yeah, I mean, the chemicals themselves, they do have multi-generational effects, and as pertains to disposable male, the males were told, oh yeah, these chemicals are safe, and no need to worry. And then they all came back and had lymphoma and all types of diseases. And it's never been studied on what the effect is going to be upon the future generations that came after these men. And also then you had Gulf War syndrome, where as a result of using all the depleted uranium and soldiers actually inhaling that dust and not even being able to wear some of these radioactive jackets like some of the higher up military people were wearing, they all came back with Gulf War syndrome.
Sure.
So, men today are definitely very much disposable. These chemicals, as it pertains to men, they're the reason why, men are so lazy, men are infertile, men are stupider, have ADHD and autism. It's also a reason why, men, have less interest in kind of exploring the real world, and they kind of just want to sit in the house and watch porn, if you will, and not be with real women because it actually destroys the part of the brain that causes men to be motivated. So all the things.
And on top of you have this whole feminist movement that has created an atmosphere for men that's intolerable, and they don't want to go after these things, because there's not much in it for men anymore. And this is where Karen of GirlWritesWhat, she delves into these issues extensively. And so, not is it the chemical and the food and, but it's fourth world stuff too, which the fourth world, they talk about the first world, second world, and third world. Well, the fourth world is the one that they don't talk about, which is the battle over the mind. And so they're attacking people psychologically through this divide and conquer crap with feminism as well. And supporting women's rights and where women aren't equal to men, but at the same time not supporting men's rights where men are not equal to women. And so this has caused a major imbalance in everything in the way that society is structured. And so men are therefore not wanting to participate, are not pooling their money in through taxes and the whole system that supports women through socialist medical care and through anything that supports women, women's rights, children, homes, these types of things.
Mhm.
Without the male tax base there, the whole thing is going to implode.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, as pertains to what I totally agree with what you're saying as far as the feminism, the whole divide and conquer, and as it pertains to the whole feminist movement and this whole chemical feminization and emasculation of men. One of the primary, couple things that people should know. Number one, processed foods, particularly microwave foods and canned foods, were sold to women as a way to liberate them from the kitchen. And now, what do all those microwave foods contain? They all contain plastic. Plastic all contains a chemical made by the Rockefellers, ExxonMobil to be specific, known as phthalates.
Yeah,
Phthalates being a chemical which sterilizes men, causes their
sure. And
penis.
that's PHTH PHTHALATES.
Yes, yeah, I believe you had it
For
right.
those who want to look that up, it's a very weird spelling. It's phthalates, phthalates. You know, it's a really weird how you say it. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, phthalate. So excuse me. Yeah. So yeah, you can look that up, but it's found in all the plastics. You know, all the plastic packaging. Another thing that they sold towards women.
It's used to soften the plastics and make the plastics flexible. So anything that you're using that is a flexible plastic typically has these phthalates in it, which are toxic and poisonous. And not only that, you know, I used to work for a soap company, and the FDA would put out a list of toxic cosmetic chemicals and additives and stuff. And we were one of the only companies out there that had nothing on the FDA's list. And, phthalates and a lot of the chemicals that we've talked about today are in most of the cosmetics out there as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what that means is that all the, women are putting all those cosmetics on their skin is going straight into their bodies. And women, naturally, they store chemicals because they have more fat. Most of these chemicals, are lipogenic, or meaning that they store themselves in the presence of fat. So of course, the woman consumes all these chemicals via orally or via by putting them on her skin. And then when the male fetus comes in, the male fetus is aborted, because male miscarriages have been skyrocketing. And this is one of the reasons why these chemicals are actually causing less men to be born. It's kind of disrupting the gender ratio because traditionally more men have been born than women, because men are...
let me just interrupt you on that point real quick. In Iquitos, Peru, the number of women to men is 8-1.
Wow. I wonder if that has something to do with all the mining companies down there in Peru, because in most of the South American countries, they have
and this is right in the middle of the Amazon, if you can believe that. Iquitos is the most, there are no roads to Iquitos. You get there by airplane or boat.
Okay. Well, I do know this as it pertains to the whole Amazon. Number one, you have a lot of oil companies going down there, and most of these chemicals are petrochemicals. So, whenever an oil company comes in, you better believe that things are going to get bad for the human population. That's why like fracking, this whole hydrofracking thing. It's all petroleum. It just totally pollutes the whole environment and the drinking water. And that was shown in the movie. That was shown in one of the movies that talked about Chevron and them going into the Amazon. But another thing is that the U.S. government, due to their whole contrived war on drugs, they actually have been spraying Roundup, a very powerful version of Roundup known as Roundup Ultra, all throughout the Amazon rainforest in Colombia in order to actually fight drugs, supposedly. They're actually not fighting drugs because it is the Colombian government and the Colombian government.
I mean, I don't know if you've ever been to South America. I've spent a month and a half down there, and coca is ubiquitous. Getting rid of coca in South America would be like getting rid of coffee or McDonald's here.
Yeah.
And you get on an airplane, they serve you coca tea. You're on the bus, they serve you coca tea. In a restaurant, there's candy, liqueurs, foods, all of this different stuff made out of it. There is no frickin' way that these morons who hide behind the drug war could ever eradicate coca, as the last 20 some odd years of them trying has shown. And when it's a major staple and a source of vitamins and nutrients in the South American diet, there is no way they'll ever get rid of it.
Exactly. And that's never been the agenda. It's just the agenda is to criminalize drugs so that you can put more men in particularly in jail, particularly African American men. So put a lot of them in jail, and then have the CIA import the drugs by working with the Colombian government and the Colombian paramilitary. So then you can kind of basically dumb down and drug up the population. And get them on these very harmful drugs, so you make profit on both ends.
Absolutely. I've got a really good quote here somewhere from Julian West. Let me see if I can find it here just a second. And it's pretty mind-blowing what these guys do, because, you know, they're admitting that they're using the criminalization of drugs for, let me see if I can find the quote here. Hopefully it's here. Where the hell is it? Anyway, to manipulate both sides of things, and they full well admit it. And I was just looking for this quote here by Jolyon West, but it's probably up on my Facebook page. I can't see it right now, but it's very interesting how they even admit that they're going to use both sides of this whole issue here. I just want to read this. I got to find it here real quick, and if it takes too long, I'll edit this little period out here.
Okay.
But here, let me just see. I know I sent it to this researcher last week. Okay, so he says the role of drugs in the exercise of political control is also coming under increased discussion. Control can be through prohibition or supply. The total or even partial prohibition of drugs gives the government considerable leverage for other types of control. An example would be the selective application of drug laws against selective components of the population, such as members of certain minority groups or political organizations. And that's by Ronald K. Siegel and Louis Jolyon West, 1975, from Hallucinations, Behavior, Experience, and Theory. And, you know, and Jolyon West was involved in MK Ultra and all of this stuff. I mean, these people are just, you know, real dirty sons of bitches.
Yeah, I mean, it's you know, I mean, as someone said before, you know, what these people worship is God, but not God, you know, as in God, some man in the sky, but gold, oil, and drugs.
Yeah.
So, you know, and you know, and it's funny because, you know, as it pertains to males today, you know, you mentioned MK Ultra. You know, the CIA, they actually, you know, used LSD as part of the MK Ultra experiments.
Sure.
And it was Eli Lilly that they actually produced LSD for.
But illegally, Eli Lilly broke the Sandoz patent because, you know, they didn't want to have to worry about importing it from Sandoz, which is, you know, Alan Dulles, who worked with Sullivan and Cromwell as a lawyer, represented IG Farben, which was partnered with Sandoz. And but they wanted to break that patent, so then Eli Lilly started producing it here in mass quantities. And then, of course, they had other people involved that raised some serious questions, people coming out of Harvard and stuff like that we'll have to save for another time. And, you know, this is kind of my area of expertise and some of what I've been researching. But let's get into homosexuality in men and women as a result of these chemicals in the environment.
Well, number one, what these chemicals do essentially is that, number one, what people must know is that estrogen, you know, even though it is a hormone primarily found in women, estrogen, for example, in women, when women are exposed to estrogen within the womb, that actually has a masculinizing effect upon the brain. Now, how it works is, as it pertains to women, the mother actually, you know, or the fetus actually, the female fetus has certain hormones that actually block their mother's estrogen from ever reaching their brain. So their brains essentially become feminine, essentially. Excuse me, there's a really bad storm.
Wow, I heard that. That was incredible.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we should speed things along. Do you have a surge protector? Or are you all right?
Yeah.
Okay. You should have one that can handle a lightning bolt. I used to run a computer store, and every time we'd have a lightning storm up here, the next day I'd have anywhere from 25 to 40 computers lined up at the front door at the store when I came in.
Wow. But yes, I do have I do have a surge protector, so I am a protector.
Excellent.
So what happens is that the estrogen actually has a masculinizing effect. So whenever there are any environmental estrogens that are in the environment, those are going to masculinize the brain of the female fetus, which is going to cause her to have a gender identity of a male and act and behave like a male and be attracted to men. This was one of the things that happened as a result of women taking DES. This was actually prescribed to pregnant women in the 1940s. The FDA prescribed it. And it was a synthetic estrogen, and it was given to pregnant women in order to prevent miscarriage. Of course, it did not prevent miscarriage, but it turned out to actually have some other deleterious effects. And one of the effects was multi-generational breast cancer and fibroids and ovarian cancer. But along with that, when the pregnant mother actually took DES, she actually was, she actually gave birth to daughters that were lesbians. And the reason why this occurred was because, again, DES, the fact that it was a functional estrogen had a masculinizing effect upon the female fetus's brain. So then that essentially made her have a gender identity of a man and be attracted to women. Now, as far as what happens with men is that these chemicals, as I mentioned, they're also act as estrogens, but they also block testosterone. So essentially, we're all born as females until the testosterone kicks.
Well, you mean conceived as females, not born as.
Well, yeah, conceived. Yeah, exactly. So we have, the ovaries are internal.
Right,
the brain is the brain of a female, and the clitoris is, it's just a clitoris until the testosterone kicks in, and then that clitoris becomes a penis. Those ovaries become testes, and that feminine brain becomes a masculine brain, which then determines gender identity. So what happens is that these chemicals actually block the action of they actually block testosterone. So testosterone can never reach the brain and then get converted into estrogen, where estrogen then has a masculinizing effect upon the brain. Not only that, the testosterone itself, just without estrogen, also plays a major role in masculinizing the brain. And these chemicals block that. Soy does that. The soy estrogen, ginseng does this too. So they block the testosterone. So essentially, the man has a brain of a female, and he has the gender identity of a female, and he's attracted to men.
Well, let me interrupt you there. What do you say to feminists who say, "Yay, this is a good thing. Yay, eugenics on the men. We don't need men. Men are obsolete." What do you say to these eugenicist, divide and conquer type feminazis?
Well, I would encourage them to do their research. One of the things I will mention is that one of the primary things that is masculinizing women and feminizing men is the birth control pill. And if you go back into the research, the birth control pill was the actual creation of Margaret Sanger. Margaret Sanger was a so-called feminist who really was a eugenicist who kind of morphed her eugenics ideals into feminism, but she was a feminist.
I do have her in my database that I sent you a link to that, and she is in fact linked under eugenics and population control. Mm-hmm. She's connected to William H. Gates. Mm-hmm. I think is that senior? I'd have to look at that.
Yeah, that was senior.
And so, of course, they both created Planned Parenthood. Mm-hmm. And let's see, if we go into that goes into the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Sir Julian Huxley, mm-hmm. and American Birth Control League.
Mm-hmm. So essentially, she was the creator of the birth control pill. Okay, with the scientist by the name of his name slips me now, but he was a scientist who worked at the Wilhelm Institute, which is one of the think tanks that was funded by the Rockefellers and the Carnegies to actually instrument the Nazi genocide against the Jews, the Wilhelm Institute. But he actually was a scientist there, and he worked with Margaret Sanger to actually create the birth control pill, which they actually were used supposedly to liberate women, from unwanted pregnancies. But it had nothing to do with that. It was definitely about population control and eugenics, because the birth control pill, it's one of the primary water pollutants in the water supply today. because whenever a woman takes a birth control pill, and this is all, and the birth control pill was heavily pushed during the whole feminist movement, heavily pushed, because it was seen as, oh, this is the way that we can
liberating
liberate
women. Free sex movement, and then, of course, the free sex movement ties into Margaret Mead at the Macy conferences, which is where they created, again, back to MK Ultra, and that group ties in to some interesting stuff. So you and I, our research is really interlocked on several levels here. Continue, please.
Yeah, I mean, it's and I salute you for your research, because you've done a lot of research that you have even done some more research that I've done. But I salute you for that. But yes, the whole feminist movement, they pushed all the birth control pills, okay? And, the birth control pill, when a woman takes it, 85% of the estrogen she pees out. And she pees it out, and it ends up in the water supply, okay? Because the estrogen is known as ethylene estriol. It does not break down, and then ends up in the water supply, and then pregnant women consume it, and it then masculinizes their female fetuses, and it feminizes their male fetuses. And most people, particularly so-called liberals or feminists, they're not going to talk about this. They're not going to talk about
quote unquote liberals. We have to be careful of the misuse of the word liberal that they've imposed on us.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Most eugenicists are liberals. They just don't know it.
Liberal by definition means of or befitting the free, and it would, a true liberal, as in where we get the word freedom, where we get the word educated, like the 7 liberal arts, etc., means of or befitting the free, or of a freeborn person, someone who's been educated in the 7 liberal arts. So, to say that usually eugenicists are liberals, that's a misapplication, because a true liberal would only be for freedom and would never violate the natural law of another person. So I just want to point that out.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, they supposedly, they want to disguise themselves as quote unquote liberal.
Right.
But yeah.
It's a socialist, communist, Zionist type movement, I think, is what's really behind it.
Absolutely. So, again, I mean, she created this birth control pill, okay, and they actually use Puerto Rican women, due to all their eugenics ideals, as guinea pigs to test the birth control pill, and they actually end up killing, 8 of them. And it's always funny, how, again, a lot of this feminist movement is supposed to empower women, but it was actually created from my research, to enslave women.
Well, sure. I mean, just obviously, half the population couldn't be taxed until they were given the right to vote, right? And so then you have Edward Bernays, the father of propaganda, behind creating this whole feminist movement and the women's liberation movement. And so that they demand the right to vote, then they have to go into the factories to get jobs to pay these taxes, because no taxation without representation. So it was a way to further break up the family, pull the women out of the homes, get them to work in the factories. See, while women may have been at home, what the other side that's omitted is that the men were beasts of burden, and they went out into the world, dealt with all the crap, all of the pollution, all of the crime, all of the idiocy going on, and then they brought the resources home for the women. And so it was really, while the women were protected, while the men were the beasts of burden, going out and dealing with all of that crap. And the beast of burden side is always omitted from, these feminist arguments. And so, that going in, getting women to vote, getting them into the factories, into the so-called women's rights movement, was just a way to break down the family unit, because the only way that they can destroy the culture and break down the population is to destroy its strongest unit, which is the family itself. And of course, America is always talking about family values, but anybody who's traveled knows that the United States has the worst level of family values anywhere. Like if you go to Europe, kids don't move out when they're 18. They don't, the children build a home in front of the grandparents' house, and then when the grandparents die, the next generation tears that house down and builds a new one, and they repeat this process on the same piece of land generation after generation. Same thing is done in most places in South America. And, Americans talk all the time about family values, but, even that is a misdirection or a dialectic, because we don't have it. So therefore you have to give people the lip service that there is some, right?
Absolutely.
But, who kicks their kids out at 17, 18 years old, and then goes around and talks about family values and all of this kind of nonsense?
Yeah, and when we're kicking our kids out, and a lot of kids these days, and we're sending them off to college to become dumbed down debt slaves.
And they're not there to support the family unit, to help raise the other kids, to help raise food, whatever would be typically done there in a traditional family. So then, the whole damn thing is designed to break apart the family unit. Even when they send these missionaries out of into these indigenous tribes to send them to school and all of this stuff. Yeah. This is to pull them out of the tribal unit, get them into the cities, dumb them down, tax them, and pollute them.
Absolutely. That's why that's one of the things that the British did when they went into Australia. They started taking away the Aborigines children away from them, so then they can indoctrinate them, and
the same thing in South America. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So,
and for that matter, they did it in the United States and in Canada as well. And in fact, somebody just sent me a documentary a couple of weeks ago about the United States programs doing that. And I interviewed Kevin Annette last year from Canada, who's been exposing these genocide schools up in Canada for years now.
Wow. Yeah. But you're absolutely right. It's designed to break down the family unit. And birth control, it fits right into that, because, the breast cancer epidemic now, it didn't come out of nowhere. The breast cancer epidemic is directly correlated with the usage of birth control.
Well, I'll bet it's correlated with the wheat and the GMO stuff, and them telling everybody, eat low fat diet now. Don't eat your fat, take your Lipitor and eat your whole grains. So then you have all of this coming up all together. So women have way more carbos in their body, way more sugar, which causes inflammation, which is going to lead to cancer and all of these other things. Throw in the chemicals and everything on top of it, and you got a nice cancer soft kill mix.
Absolutely. And birth control itself, causes women to become obese. So you're absolutely right. And then the media, they show all these anorexic models to women, while at the same time promoting Coca-Cola and McDonald's.
Sure. It's funny that you should say that, because my first wife, who is from Serbia, Yugoslavia, she was very much into herself and beauty, and she would eat chips and diet soda. That was her primary diet until one year she left here for Serbia, and she was there for a month or 2 months ahead of me. But the first 3 or 4 weeks, she couldn't get out of bed as her body detoxed, because, of course, that crap is illegal in Yugoslavia.
Yeah.
The aspartame and stuff in the food was totally illegal there. So, she starts going through all this detox, and 3-4 weeks later, before she could finally get out of bed.
Yeah, everything here in America, all this stuff, anything goes. And I do predict with the whole Obama's giving out free birth control, which is nothing more than welfare for Planned Parenthood. They were the ones behind that.
MAFA 21.
Yeah, absolutely. I do predict that you're going to see more breast cancer, you're going to see more homosexuality in men and women, and you're going to see more male infertility. Because again, just due to the effects of this whole feminist birth control, free birth control for women movement. So it's definitely social engineering, and as it pertains to men, a lot of women these days, again, there are less men being born. Okay, the men that are being born don't want to have sex with them, don't want to mate with them, and the ones who do want to have sex with them, their sperm is defective. All as a result, and this can all be tied to the effects of the feminist movement and their push for birth control, and and companies using that whole feminist ideology to push canned foods onto women so they wouldn't have to be in the kitchen, and then
TV dinners with all the plastics and all the crap. And
exactly.
All right, so let's get into You know, we mentioned it, we talked about it a little bit, but let's get into vegetarianism and veganism and how that all ties to the feminizing and eugenics population control.
Well, the whole vegetarian movement, it's essentially animal rights activist propaganda, at its core level. But again, with the whole vegetarian movement, okay, if you don't have people eating animal products, then you have to replace it. So what is the primary replacement, for vegetarians? When they stop eating meat and stop eating eggs and stop eating cow's milk, they consume soy. So, I mean, it's a perfect fit, because you have tofu, you have scrambled tofu, you have silken tofu, people, they eat tofu like it's meat, and you have soy milk. So a lot of vegetarians out here, they're not eating meat, but they're going to probably the worst food that you can eat these days.
Absolutely.
So, it's kind of like the whole, demonize the meat, say meat is bad, meat is bad, meat is bad, and then get them on the soy. So
right.
Then we can have more people eating soy, and then emasculate men. Lower the testosterone. Get them
lower their thinking ability because there's no saturated fats to power the brain.
Absolutely, and soy itself, soy is actually, and I know a lot about agriculture. I'm not an agriculture expert, but soy, it absorbs stuff. So oftentimes, like when you have really toxic soil contaminated with heavy metals, you plant soy in it, because the soil will uptake all those heavy metals, and then you can actually, detox the soil, if you will. So if you think about American soil and all the chemtrails and all the aluminum that they're spraying over the planet, soy contains high amounts of aluminum. That's why when you give a young baby boy soy infant formula, not only do you emasculate and feminize him and lower his ability to produce testosterone and delay his age that he's going to reach puberty, you also turn him into a criminal, essentially, because he's getting high amounts of these heavy metals, which disrupt the proper functioning of his brain. Of course, not only that, but soy oil within itself, it is a polyunsaturated fat. And the more polyunsaturated fats you consume, the more violent and homicidal you're going to be. That's why, in many cultures, like in particular, like in Japan, they consume a lot of fish oil and a lot of fatty fish, and they're more peaceful. They're more friendly, because they're actually consuming what their brain needs, because soy oil is actually toxic for the brain, whereas fish oil and some of these other saturated fats, cholesterol, and all pretty much animal fats, those are good for the brain. So essentially, with the whole vegetarian movement, it dumbs people down because they're not getting the adequate amounts of saturated fat to fuel their body and to fuel their brain, and they're not getting cholesterol. They're getting high amounts of soy. They're consuming high amounts of grains. They're not consuming any omega-3 fats, which are primarily found in animal-based foods. They're also not getting vitamin B12, which is very important for the brain. They're not getting zinc, which is very important for the brain. Essentially, it is a diet of poverty, because
and it's a diet of, and it just wreaks havoc on the reproductive system too, man. It just destroys it.
Absolutely, because it's a very low protein diet. And when you don't get adequate amounts of protein, and vegetarians say, well, plants contain protein. No, it doesn't. Plants contain incomplete proteins. Animal foods actually contain complete proteins.
Right.
And if you're just consuming spinach, soy, and nuts and grains all day, you're not going to get adequate amounts of protein that your body needs.
Right, but I think the real issue there is you're not getting enough HDL cholesterol to fuel the brain, as if the brain is mostly cholesterol and the rest water, then you're just giving the body absolutely nothing to work with. Absolutely. And you need plants for certain vitamins and nutrients, but the core food that we need is really saturated fat.
Absolutely. Saturated fat, high quality omega-3 fat, and then, cholesterol. Now, your body does produce cholesterol, but it's more efficient for you to consume cholesterol.
But it really produces it in reaction to carbos and LDL cholesterol from grains and stuff. So, and it produces it to protect the body. And I think the body can only produce like 20% of what it needs anyway. So you really need, so even the best vegetarian or vegan would only be getting like 20% of the cholesterol that their brains need.
Absolutely, absolutely, because it produces it in response to starvation, because that's what a vegetarian diet functionally is. It is a starvation diet. And many cultures, like when there's like war going on, just huge amount of poverty, famine, they become vegans. Not because it's good for their survival, but
they have to.
They have to, exactly.
Well, anytime and anytime there was a drought, it's my personal belief that in ancient times, grain stores were only used to survive major droughts or wars and the like, because if you had a famine, of course you would want a store of wheat or rice or something to get you through the months. But as soon as you have another food supply, you drop that stuff and you don't touch it again until the next drought.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one of the things that consuming a lot of grains does, it increases, your insulin levels. And insulin is your body's fat storing and promoting hormone. So essentially, you put on
and it increases your appetite, which perpetuates the whole thing as well.
Exactly. So essentially, then, if you're fat, then you can survive that famine because you consume so many grains. Whereas, if you didn't consume all the grains, then you would die out because your body wouldn't have any energy to burn, because fat is the most important fuel for the body, particularly like in times of starvation or famine. So if you're fat and you're obese, have lots of body fat, you are more likely to perpetuate your species. You're more likely to survive the famine, if you will. But yeah, the whole vegetarian diet, it definitely fits into a lot of, it fits into the whole eugenics program, because they kind of, they merge a vegetarian diet with soy. So, a lot of vegetarians consume huge amounts of soy. And they've also merged it into the whole global warming myth, right, saying that, people need to eat less animals because it's, because carbon, this, that, and the third.
Right. And every pot grower knows the more carbon you put in your crop, the faster the crop grows and the more oxygen it puts out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So essentially, and the UN, they've advocated that people need to stop eating less meat.
Start eating less meat, yeah.
Yeah, the UN's all about population control and eugenics. So,
sure,
they're advocating this vegetarian diet not to help people, not to prevent heart disease, not to prevent all these problems that people have, but essentially to destroy people, to get them on the soy, to get them on the grains, and, of course, a lot of the grains these days are being genetically modified. Monsanto is actually working on a genetically modified version of wheat. And again, once they genetically modify one thing, then the genes go into everything else. So that's why most of the soy these days, even if it's organic, is genetically modified, because the genes of the GMO soy infects every other soy plant out there. Just like the genes of the canola plant, of GMO canola, affects every other single canola plant out there. That's why the guy Percy Smizer in his documentary David versus Monsanto said that I can never grow canola again, because all the canola now, it will forever be contaminated. It's going to forever contain the genes from the GMO canola that they grow in Canada. So vegetarian diet, it's a complete sham. It's a complete fraud. And I definitely believe that they're pushing it.
And you were a vegetarian, correct?
Yes, I was vegetarian for about I was a raw vegan for maybe 2 years, and then I was a regular vegetarian for about 4 years. And just from doing the research and really kind of looking at all the facts, I got out of it. I realized it was a sham, and it was, it's sometimes you think about, I think about it laughingly, but it's most of this whole vegetarian diet and a lot of the propaganda around it is based essentially fear and guilt-based mind control. So sometimes you wonder, who really designed this whole movement? Because a lot of the tactics that they use, make people feel guilty. Meat is murder. Meat kills. A lot of these tactics. It's like purely like some serious psychological warfare tactics going on here. It's designed to make people feel guilty for craving meat, because human beings are supposed to crave meat. We're not supposed to crave wheat and soda and French fries and all this other stuff they got us craving. Those are drugs. Wheat actually acts as a drug within the body. But we're made to crave, meat, eggs, things that have cholesterol in them, things that have fat in them, because that's what our body needs. Our body needs high quality fats in order for us to be healthy, fertile, and to look good.
Yeah, and to be thin and not carry around a bunch of extra baggage packed all over your body.
Exactly. To look good, to be attractive. I mean, that's a part of the whole, this whole mating game.
Somebody pointed out to me that they had never seen a celiac person who was overweight. I'm not saying that there aren't any, but they had never seen an overweight celiac person.
Wow. Well, I've never seen, I've never met a celiac. I know some people who are completely intolerant to wheat. But I've never seen an overweight celiac person myself either. But I don't know too many celiacs. I mean, a lot of them are out there. I mean, because most people are intolerant to wheat and they just don't know it because the doctor tells them, they complain of like brain fogginess and headaches and all types of other symptoms that, are a result of consuming wheat. But they never think to I mean, the doctors don't. I mean, because doctors don't know anything. So,
well, that's a sweeping generalization, but most doctors have limited knowledge in some areas.
Exactly.
So, let's get into, Curtis, condoms, lubricants, dildos, and vibrators.
Mm-hmm. Well, number one, as far as the dildos, most of the dildos are made with PVC plastic. And again, we mentioned about how, whenever a plastic is soft, and it can be inserted into the vagina, it's going to contain phthalates. It's going to contain phthalates. And one of the things that all these PVC plastic dildos do contain, they call them rubber jelly, but most of them are made with PVC plastic. They do contain phthalates, and those are linked in women to fibroids, endometriosis, and breast cancer. But of course, when you insert that into your vagina, you're absorbing all those chemicals. So it's going straight into your womb. So then, of course, your male fetus will be exposed to that and will experience a lot of other problems as a result of it. A lot of the lubricants, they actually contain parabens. Parabens are a functional estrogen mimicking petrochemical, which has been shown to have been linked to male infertility. And this is something that they actually put in a lot of, most of the lubricants these days that people are using are, to contain those parabens. Oftentimes it's not labeled. Sometimes it is labeled. If you actually buy a regular KY jelly lubricant, for example, we'll say parabens on it. But if you just buy a lubricated condom, then it's not going to, because they don't have to list the ingredients that go into condoms. There's a lot of stuff that goes into condoms that people should know. So the lubricants also contain some of these different chemicals. And then as far as the condoms, particularly the spermicidal condoms, they actually contain a chemical by the name of non-oxyl 9. And this is actually, it's a part of a class of chemicals known as, they're known as APEs. It's some huge scientific name. I can't pronounce it. I believe it's like axophenol exolates, I believe. But it's a class of chemicals that actually has been shown, to link to the feminization of male fish in aquatic life. Because what happens is that, when you actually wear this condom, it actually breaks down into another chemical known as NPEs. And those NPEs, or oxynonyl, just call NPEs, oxynonyl 9, I believe. Those are linked to male infertility, the suppression of testosterone, and also to breast cancer in women, but also ends up in the water supply where it ends up feminizing the fish. And non-oxy 9 is actually a surfactant that they use oftentimes in the garment industry. So a lot of your fabrics contain the chemical. So when you wash your clothes, those chemicals go down the drain and end up feminizing the fish, and then you end up consuming the water via your drinking water, because there's essentially, when you just drink it out of tap water, there's no way that the government can filter out some of those chemicals.
The government.
Yeah, I mean, and they're not going to filter them out.
Exactly, and they're not going to, and they don't want to.
They don't want to. So
we're talking about the same people that put fluoride in the water to tell us that was good, for cavities, when it just, when Prozac and all these things are made out of fluoride,
Exactly. Prozac's in the water too, and that causes
absolutely.
That causes shrimp to commit suicide. That's another story, because it makes.
Are you serious?
Yeah, there was actually a study that showed that what happens is that when Prozac gets in the water, the shrimp normally, they kind of, they hang out on the bottom of the ocean, because if they come to the top of the ocean, the seagulls are going to eat them. And But when exposed to Prozac, the shrimp, kind of lose their brains, if you will, and start coming to the top of the ocean. So essentially, they come to the top of the ocean and they get killed by the seagulls. But naturally, they don't come to the top of the ocean. They only do that under the influence of Prozac. So essentially, committing suicide. Because shrimp know that, avoid coming to the top because I'm going to get killed by those hungry
birds, those hungry black, shadows that come out of the sky and eat us.
Exactly.
All right. So, detoxing, what can we do to detox and to prevent as much of this from getting into our body? Obviously, use natural birth control, no longer birth pills. All right, we reverse osmosis water filters, no corn syrup whatsoever, grass-fed meats whenever possible, no GMO foods, stay out of the middle of the grocery store, buy your foods on the outside whenever possible. And what else can people do?
Yeah, I actually discussed that in my recording. I have two recordings. One kind of, dealing with some of the products that men use. And
you're selling these recordings on your website, is that correct?
Yes. They're up on my website, and I kind of lay out how to detox, and I'll be sure to send you a copy because I appreciate you having me on air. I lay out how to detox some of these chemicals from your body and also how to avoid some of these chemicals. Because, there's a variety of sources for them. You mentioned a lot of great tips, but there's other things people can do to avoid some of these different estrogen mimicking chemicals, particularly for women, because a lot of the women's products these days contain high amounts of them. They are men's products, but men don't use as many beauty products as of yet. We're getting up there.
Right. Wasn't it originally that mascara and cosmetics and stuff were created for men for these big masquerade balls, and then it eventually switched over to women, I think, in the 1700s.
I never knew, that's actually a fact that I never knew. No, I never knew that. I have no idea. I have no idea where, most of these beauty and fashion trends, you see them.
Well, the face powder was originally cocaine.
Oh, wow. Man, but I never knew that. But my recordings, the chemical feminization and masculinization of men lays out how to avoid all the chemicals. One thing that men can do is avoid canned foods, particularly canned beer, because all that contains bisphenol A.
And not only that, it's stored in aluminum, and then they spray the inside of the aluminum with this stuff to prevent the, breakdown of the beer or whatever, this plastic coating inside the can. And
Yeah. So, that's one thing that men can do. And as far as for women, I have a recording called Death by Estrogen, how hormonal chemicals harm women's health. And it kind of lays out, all the products that women should avoid. I could say one thing women can definitely avoid is all bleached tampons, because all those contain dioxins.
Sure. Women should just be getting the cloth reusable ones off of the internet anyway. And there's a whole lot of information about that. And then you have these things, you use them for years. You're not running to the store. You're not asking your boyfriend or husband to go to the damn store in the middle of the night and stand there with a bag of Tampax or something like that. So thanks all of you ladies who get reusable pads, etc. We all appreciate that.
Yes, it is definitely good for the environment. But I would say, women should not be sold on the whole natural cotton pads, because
hemp is there's hemp ones available. There's all sorts of stuff, but get organic, get hemp. There's good stuff out there that's available.
A lot of the cotton these days is genetically modified.
Right.
And most of the cotton is heavily, cotton is probably the most pesticided crop in the planet.
Sure. Cotton uses, I think, approximately 50% of all pesticides used in the U.S.
Absolutely.
So, all right, Curtis, what is the single most important idea or concept that you would like people to take away from this interview?
The single most important idea is that, number one, people need to actualize their power, understand that they have power. Oftentimes, we think of ourselves as victims, as, just mere humans, just these kind of, non-important entities that are on this planet that just work jobs, eat popcorn, genetically modified
And
popcorn.
nothing affects you.
Yeah, nothing affects me, and I'll just watch TV, and we kind of what we do is that we hand over our power to the elites, and then we complain when they when they pimp us, essentially, when they smack us upside the face and take away our rights and do all this other stuff to us. But essentially, we have handed over our power to them because they have waged so much psychological warfare on us that, number one, we don't know who we are, we don't know how powerful we are, and we don't, realize, our ability to make progressive changes upon our planet that can positively affect ourselves and the rest of humanity. So I just encourage people to take their power back. Definitely check out your website, the Trivium Education. You have some great information on that website as far as, learning how people, are mind controlled. People need to check that out. People need to, start just kind of research everything, never take anything at face value. Research everything. Be a critical thinker. Don't be one of these emotional, reactionary, the Republicans are trying to take away my birth control. One of these just reactionary, just non-thinking, non-critical robots. We need to really, we're powerful. We have tremendous amounts of power. So I just encourage people to start, to read books, but don't just read any books. Because a lot of the books, many of the books out here are propaganda too.
Well, whatever you read, learn to filter it with critical thinking, because just having the ability to read doesn't mean that you're not being mind controlled all the same.
Absolutely, because a lot of people, they can read the Bible, and then and then just regurgitate all the bullshit in the Bible. So being able to read, and reading books is not going to save you. Again, as you mentioned, you have to be able to kind of filter out the information and determine, the truth from the BS. So I just encourage people to, number one, just, again, actualize your power, realize that we're all connected. There's separation and division is an illusion. Even we're talking about the whole construct of feminism and men and women. All that separation is an illusion. We're all part of the same, same thing. The universe is just one unified energy field. So, if you kind of see yourself as a part of the whole, then, a lot of these social engineers can't come in and tell you that you're separate and then enslave you as a result of it. Because, the whole divide and conquer thing. So that's what I would just encourage people to do. Just, begin to do research, of course, but make sure you do the research, from a critical thinking perspective. And also, just realize your power. You have power, and you don't need to hand over that power to some so-called authority, which is
exactly. Thank you. I'm glad you are aware of that and hit that. All right. What's your website?
Website is drcurtisduncan.com. People can also check me out on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Dr. Curtis Duncan. That's DrCurtisDuncan. They can also email me at dr.curtisduncan@gmail.com. And again, that's Dr. Curtis Duncan, DrCurtisDuncan.com. Facebook is, facebook.com/Dr. Curtis Duncan. And then my email address, you can contact me, is dr.curtisduncan@gmail.com.
Great. Any plans for a book?
Yes. I do plan on writing a book about, some of the stuff that I talk about on the show as far as the chemical feminization and masculinization of men. And I also plan on writing a book called The Conspiracy to Make You Sick. And that's going to lay out just a lot of different things that we talk about on the show, because a lot of it is people just have bad information. And when you have bad information, you're going to have bad health and just a lot of quote unquote bad things. And again, that's all by design, because, the pharmaceutical companies, all these other entities, they need people to be sick, just like religious people, the organized religions, they need followers or believers. A belief is to accept something without knowledge. They need just blind kind of robots to just kind of, tell, that, can be told what to do and how to think and, how to live.
Sure.
So, yeah, I plan on writing a book called The Conspiracy to Make You Sick. And, that's what's in the pipeline.
Well, thank you so much, Curtis Duncan. I really appreciate you coming on Gnostic Media and laying out all of this very important information that connects a whole lot of dots to what we've been covering over the last several months here.
Well, thank you again, John, for having me on air. I appreciate, the work that you do, and please do keep it up because it's definitely necessary. And thank you again for the opportunity, my friend.